Um, and just bear with us for 1 second while I do something. Okay, there we go. And we are now officially live. Okay, hi everyone. I am joined by Abdullah Gondal for a very special live stream. Unannounced, unplanned, but let's do this. Abdullah Gondal has gone through and created a set of slides that he's going to share with us on the topic of is Islam a personality cult? But before we get into that, how are you doing, man? It's been a long time.
Oh, I'm doing amazing. Just busy with life, starting school soon. So I've been trying to get
Wait. You're telling me you have a life? You don't just do this all day?
Of course, I don't do this all day. I mean, I barely do it now. It's just like sitting on the bus. I'll write a post. So I've been trying to get in. Like most of my reading is done on my commute back from work or going to work or to school. So today, I mean, the topic I chose is convenient revelations and how Muhammad used the Quran. Like it will be so obvious. I mean, and as a Muslim, like now when I was making the presentation, I was just bewildered. Like, why did I not notice any of this before? This so obvious manipulation of people using religious blackmail, right? And it also follows from the Quran telling us, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ, like, don't you like think about it? Don't you see it? So what I also want to show today is that not only Muhammad using the Quran to his benefit, but also like how crazy and fanatic his followers were, like how they admired him to like extremist levels. And we're also gonna go through a couple of other things. Like we'll also see how Muhammad indirectly would put verses out that'll be like just self-appreciation, like I'm the best of the best, blah blah blah. And when you look at it from that light, from the psychological perspective of Muhammad the prophet, and there's certain parts like where you substitute the word Allah for Muhammad, and that's when the real meaning of the verse will come out. And it also gives you a very deep glance into the frustrations of Muhammad, like how whenever he was challenged, he would resort to using threats. And instead of actually giving an answer, he'll just threaten them or say, "Oh, if you don't agree with me, you're gonna go to hell, so you better." So without further ado, let's get into it. I mean, it's about 33 slides.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so convenient revelations. Is Islam a personality cult? So as Abdullah Gondal said, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a bunch of things that Abdullah Gondal has collected, and just to keep in mind that we're not saying that this is necessarily what Muslims do. Like obviously a lot of the things in here Muslims can't do because Muhammad isn't around, so like collecting his spittle and stuff like that, like some of the strange things. But what we want you to, so Abdullah Gondal, if you don't know who he is, he's an ex-Muslim from Pakistan. He's left Islam, what, 2-3 years ago now?
About 2017 May, so yeah, 2 years almost, yeah.
And I'm also an ex-Muslim from Canada, and so both of us left Islam independently of our own, and we became good friends. What we're doing here is we want people to, especially Muslims, to just think about, just think, is there any red flags here? Is there something here that can make you reconsider whether this is truly from God? We're not here just to poke fun. We don't do this because we have nothing better to do. Like Abdullah Gondal has a life, I have a life. We're doing this as a social effort, as a sort of sadaqah, as you can say, a sadaqah. We're hoping to have this sadaqah jariyah, even you could say, an ongoing charity by creating these set of videos to help people to consider whether this is truly from God. And if it's not, then you have everything to lose because your one and only life you're spending on a false religion, right? So this is why we do it. We saw the light, so to speak, and we want to help other people see the light. So do you have the slides open as well?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so slide 2. Go ahead.
Perfect. So like you can see, we have divided it up into 4 different parts. The first part is going to focus on verses in the Quran that ask you to obey Muhammad and almost literally put Muhammad on the same pedestal as Allah himself. And then we'll jump into the second part, which is pretty dark if you look at it from a psychological perspective, where this delusional man is going on and on about praising himself as the best man and the best example, the most righteous. And following from there is the most interesting bit, part 3. That's where we're going to discuss direct manipulation, where Muhammad wanted something and would literally just use Allah as his puppet to gain exactly what he wanted. And then we will, in part 4, go and look at the kind of people who followed him and the level of fanaticism they had. I actually did have a 5th part to it, which was blasphemy, but then I realized that would stretch out the conversation too long, and blasphemy itself is a whole separate topic. So we'll leave that aside, but that also ties in nicely with it. Okay. So let's get into slide number 4. Okay. This is the first slide for the first chapter. All right. So if you notice here, to have Allah's love and His pleasure, you have to literally attain Muhammad's love, Muhammad's pleasure, and obey Muhammad. Now, you can clearly see what he's trying to do here. It's like, hey, you love Allah, you love God. Okay, you know what God wants you to do? God wants you to follow and love me. Can I prove that God's actually talking to me? No. But as soon as you cement this belief into someone's head, you've put them in a vicious circle where you have complete control over their mind and their decisions, because you can blackmail them using religious beliefs, like exactly here. And it gets worse. Like if let's keep going. So for example, in this one, you can see that to get God's mercy, one needs to obey Muhammad no matter what the cost. And like, why would God make His mercy contingent upon the obedience to a fallible 7th century man? I mean, is that exactly this kind of tactic is what you see over and over in cults, where religious people in position of power and authority abuse their positions.
So I would just add that, again, we can't prove, we're not trying to necessarily prove right now that this is not Allah, some some deity outside of Muhammad speaking. We're saying, like, think about it. Is it possible that this is Muhammad talking, not another entity? And does this raise any red flags? Yes, it raises some huge red flags. If somebody is telling you, you need to love me, and if you love me, then God's gonna love you. Now that's something to think about. Is this truly from God? So that just to jump in there.
Alrighty, exactly. I agree with you. And like, this is the problem. Like, if once you get into this belief and this mindset, then it becomes like a cycle. The person has complete control over you. You might be thinking it's God speaking, but it's actually just a guy appointing himself as an imaginary deity's mouthpiece.
Yeah.
And manipulating you.
And in the early Dawah, we were taught in the early Dawah, the emphasis is on Tawheed, and emphasis on Jahannam and Jannah, to emphasize heaven and hell, to emphasize the belief in the hereafter, so that once they're hooked, then you can sell them anything.
Exactly. And like, when you go to the next slide, or as we progress, we'll see. Yes. Okay. You'll notice that from just asking people to obey him to gain God's love, they are now changing into threats, where you're literally telling people, hey, obey me. If you don't, then God will burn you. And this is like one of those, these are really strong anchors in a believer's brain, because he actually believes that the reality of the afterlife is more real than this life. And then you use that belief as a blackmail to tell him that, to scare him into obedience. It's really, really, like, once you go forward, if we keep going to the next slide, 459, you'll notice like he keeps putting his obedience next to Allah. You notice this phrase, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ, like obey Allah and His Messenger. And there are certain verses where He even excludes Allah completely. He's like, obey Allah, like
Obey the
obey
messenger, you
Muhammad.
mean?
Yeah, obey the Messenger, and He excludes Allah at certain points.
That's interesting.
So we are on slide 6 right now?
459.
459. Okay. All right. And like exactly as you can see in like verse 480, it says, "He who obeys Allah he who obeys Muhammad
Sorry,
has obeyed
480?
Allah."
Oh, yeah, at the bottom. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's like he who obeys the messenger has obeyed God. You're literally elevating the Muhammad's actions in terms of authority to the equivalent of God. But then like straight up a threat after. But those who turn away, they're done. Now, in the next slide, you will notice where Muslims are not allowed to disagree with Muhammad on anything whatsoever. Here we have 3 different verses where you're told that if Muhammad judges between you, you just have to agree. There is no second option. And in verse 33, 36, like anybody who disagrees, it's a clear-cut statement that he has gone into error. Nobody, and the last one, 2451, it's amazing. It's then puts it as an attribute of the believers that they're so submissive. Only thing the good believer has to say to Muhammad, we hear and we obey. So what's happening right now is not only Muhammad is saying that my obedience will get you closer to God and get you His love. And also, the most beloved of the people, the most pious ones, are the ones that are the most submissive. They'll surrender their intellect completely to Muhammad at his disposal. Do whatever. We hear and we obey. So he makes the attributes of the pious. He's incentivizing people to be obedient, and he's again, like you can see, he's using religion.
Yeah, and I was taught as a Muslim, like I was given examples of this where, for example, when Muhammad commanded something, like when he said, grow your beard, it became wajib or obligatory on people to grow their beard. You have to grow your beard. And for example, there was examples they used to give us where a man was walking and he was outside the mosque and the Jummah khutbah was going on, and in the Jummah khutbah, the Prophet said, sit down to somebody, and the guy sat down outside the mosque because he's like, I heard the Prophet say that. So they taught us this. They're like, no, you have to go, whatever he says. Like, and in some ways, this was kind of like Salafi leaning mosque, but like the Sufis, they take it to a whole other level. Like, they're like, we're going to eat watermelon the way he ate watermelon. I don't even know how
like
he got watermelon.
Fingers. With the fingers like this, we're gonna pick it up. All those minute details I get into.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, who knows how strongly narrated those things are, but they want to do as much as possible. They even wear sandals that they think are like prophetic sandals, which is like, which is interesting.
I remember some narrations. I think it was Abdullah bin Umar where he was traveling and he stopped and he then pretended to trip over something, and then other companions like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, years ago when the Prophet was alive, I saw him do the same thing, so I just got up and tripped myself to imitate him.
That's pretty funny.
And I mean, exactly, like the whole thing, like, hold on to my sunnah. It's again incentivizing people that you gotta obey me. It just comes back to that central point again.
Yeah, and to some people, this actually helps them. They feel like the fact that this is all laid out for you, like what to do, that everything I do like Muhammad, I'm getting closer to God. They feel it's like a good thing, and so they go in the washroom, like left leg first, right leg. So when you wake up in the morning, you're saying all these things. So your whole life is so full of these things that you don't have time to really consider anything else. You just like, it becomes, but in some ways it's a challenge too, because you become so automatic, right? Like when you start doing all these things all the time, it becomes like, am I even feeling anything now? Am I just doing it because I have to do all these things? So that's kind of one of the downsides of having so many rituals that are, in Islam.
Yeah, exactly. The one point that comes like the next verse, which is 2463. It's just taking it to another level. Now here it says that you can't even address Muhammad the same way you address your fellow brothers or your friends, because Muhammad's special. And it literally says that if you dissent from Muhammad's order, literally dissent, you disagree, fitna, or a painful punishment will strike you. I mean, by this point, it should be obvious how religious blackmail and belief is being used to incentivize people. Now, the same things repeated. There's more and more and more verses. The verses I'm showing are just a figment of all the other verses that are there. For example, 4:115 says that anybody who opposes the prophet after guidance has come to him, he's gonna go to hell. Just straight up says it. And 592, obey Allah and the Messenger and beware. And then 47:33, same thing. Obey Allah and His Messenger and don't invalidate your deeds. So if you don't obey Him, all your good deeds go to waste. And there's a cute example come up later, which is by the end of the presentation, it'll be so obvious it almost becomes like a joke.
Okay, next slide.
Yeah, so I'm on 8.1. This one, again, is very important because war booty was it was a huge incentive. And literally almost most of the war, the capital you would generate from war would be through war booty and slavery. And if you notice here, people asked how to divide the war booty. No, Muhammad and Allah. Muhammad and Allah will decide, just let it be everything. And I think there's a verse where it says that he
used to do a lot of things that used to piss off his companions. For example, there's one case where he gave a whole valley of things to one guy. I forgot what it was, and the rest of his companions are like, "Oh,
we fought for it. We deserve more." Yeah,
and they're all like. And then he gave them a moving thing saying they get camels and you guys get the messenger of Allah, and they were all crying and they were so happy because they get the messenger of Allah, and these guys get camels and stuff. But it's interesting.
It was Muhajirin and the Ansar were a conflict thing, and so that's something like that. Yeah,
the two tribes. Yeah, well, this guy was a new convert. I forget who it was, or maybe he wasn't even a convert to Islam. So Muhammad, he gave him all of this money in order to convince him to become Muslim, right? That was kind of the idea. So that's why he gave a lot to this guy, and then expecting that if he converted to Islam, then whatever would come. And in a sense, that was kind of smart. If you have all of these people, and you can get them to fight for you, and you don't even give them anything at the end of it, and then you have someone else and you want to convince him to join your side, and you give him all these gifts. I mean, maybe he was actually doing an intelligent thing for his cause at that point. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we don't give him credit. The guy, succeeded.
Was smart.
According to what, assuming this is actually what happened, we don't know for sure, but the character is intelligent, right?
Yeah, the way he knew exactly what to tell people and what they wanted to hear. He's very good with his words. Yeah. I'd give him. I mean, we just war booty actually brings me to mind. There's a whole thing where the Muslims, I think it's Banu Mustalik, where they attack this tribe, and then the men capture these. The hadith literally is quite shocking in its wording in itself. It says that we, the Sahaba, we captured these fine, beautiful Arab women, and we had been away from our wives, and we did not know what to do, and if we could have sex with them. So the verse came down that you can, and the women were married, so they were more confused, oh, can we really have sex with them? Because they're not single slaves, right? So the verse came down, yes, you can have sex with married slave women, even though their husbands might be alive. And then Muhammad also goes on, is oh, you can also use the pull-out method, just so they don't get pregnant, and when you have to resell them, they have more value. And the way the timing of this revelation also fits in perfectly with the idea of convenient revelations. And before I forget, it doesn't stop here. The whole concept of nasikh and mansukh, the abrogation and cancellation of verses, is an extension of this convenient revelation, or actually is the thing that enables Muhammad to make these verses up as he goes along. It gives him the authority, he gives himself the authority using Allah. And it's not limited to just him using verses to his advantage, he would also just use it to cover up his mistakes. For example, like a verse where this guy was sitting behind Muhammad who's blind, and Allah sends this verse, I think it's 495, Surah Nisa verse 95, about like people are not allowed to stay behind in war except this. And then the guy's like, oh, but what about me? I'm blind. And instantly he's like, oh, wait, amendment to the verse, and it fixes the verse. And I mean, same thing where there's a verse, I think in Surah Baqarah, which talks about tying where you can see the thread of
Fajr,
day
right?
and night.
Yeah.
About fasting times. And people were confused, so they actually started tying threads and waiting till they could see the thread if it was enough light out. So then quickly, and because of the confusion, an amendment would come in to fix and resolve the issue. I mean, you'll see these things almost everywhere. And I mean, when you look in the hadith literature, it's shocking. The amount is amazing. Like what I'm showing you here is just like maybe 10%, not even of that. Let's get back to the slides. We were at verse 961. So here, like, I mean, this verse says you're not allowed to abuse the messenger of Allah, otherwise you will burn in hell. I mean, it's petty at this point where like God is burning people in hell for somebody abusing someone. Like, does it really matter?
Yeah.
Like, God, you're omnipotent. You can protect your messenger. Like, why would you just burn some? It's like a child, you know?
Yeah.
It follows on from well, if you can relate this to Surah Lahab as well, where like, hey, you're up there, you know, Muhammad's uncle said call them names, and then Allah just joins in the yelling match, like another human. Hey, he called you bad names. I'm gonna reveal a surah calling him even worse names.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, and again, a question is this really from the Creator, or is this like Muhammad's personality coming out? You know, like his projected personality, Allah being that, because we would expect better from God, right? We would expect much better.
Definitely. And we see these, you'll see the frustration in some of the verses where it's like, especially when we get to the part where his wives come into play. I'll be part 3. But let's switch to the self-admiration. Now, the one thing you need to understand is...
Sorry, which verse are we on?
We're on slide 12, second subheading.
Oh, self-admiration. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we start this chapter, I want you to understand that whilst reading the verses, replace the word Allah with Muhammad and try to read the verse again. You will realize how dark of a mindset one needs to have and how psychologically rejected one needs to have that he starts praising himself. Like, the narcissism really shows, and you can see the desperation where he's praising himself to get the affection of his followers. And then he's giving them incentives, as in slide 13, like the first verse. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Muhammad says that indeed in the Messenger of Allah is the best example for you to follow till the end of times. He basically declared himself as the best man to ever walk the earth. And then in Surah 68 verse 4, he's the best of character. Like, there's nobody who can match his character. While when we actually see his character, like, he's not the best of character by any measure, especially in the way we look at things now. In 33:46, again, he's like the luminous lamp of God. And I mean, in other verses in Surah Nur, he even goes like, I am the light of God, and goes on like, God has sent you a light.
It's interesting that I used to kind of wonder about this too, when Muhammad said, I am the best of you, and I am the best of you to my wives, to his wives. The best of you is he was best to his wives, and I'm the best to my wives. And I used to wonder about that. I'm like, okay, this guy, he has so many wives connected to the mosque, living in little chambers. Like, they barely have any room. They don't have much money. They're complaining in the Quran. They're complaining how unhappy they are. And Allah threatens to get rid of all of them. I mean, we're not talking about that here. But, like, this used to make me wonder, how is he the best? And I'm thinking...
when he's the one with the most problems, right?
Yeah, and, like, why... Like, you know, like, you would... You know, like, in some senses, like, I think actually Christianity that has monogamy, it almost seems like, practically speaking, for most people, that would be better than polygamy, and especially extreme polygamy, where you have like 13 wives. I mean, I can't see how any of those women would be happy, right? You know what I mean? It's just such a bad situation for them, especially Aisha being like a little child, right? Assuming even if she was like 19 or whatever.
Or was it Sauda that had to give up her day because she was too
Her
fat?
night, yeah,
Her night, exactly, right?
yeah,
Like, how can you be the best husband when you're actually differentiating between your wives like that? And I mean, he also admitted, like, he straight up said that my favorite wife is Aisha.
yeah.
Like, he spent the last days with her, would favor her and whatnot.
Except she'll say that's not true.
Yeah, he was very jealous.
Who knows?
It's gonna get more interesting when we get to his wives.
Okay.
So, we're at verse 33:56.
Okay.
This one is very important because literally this says that God, the omnipotent, omniscient creator of the whole universe of everything, is up there in the heavens along with the angels singing praises for his creation, a man named Muhammad. You're just pushing it. Like, at this point, you're just pushing it. Like, you're making God send blessings upon yourself.
Yeah.
Just so the other people will see this as something holy and they'll do the same thing, which is what the verse literally says. God is doing it, and so are the angels. You better do it too.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
But what's interesting is the very, very next verse is the frustration is what I said. When he couldn't get his way, one verse he'll ask something, and the next he'll instantly start threatening people.
Yeah.
Surely those who annoy Allah and his messenger are cursed, and they have a humiliating punishment. Like, something must have ticked him off for him to use strong words like this. Like, somebody pissed him off.
I have to say, the funny thing is, when I left Islam, I had a friend who knows Arabic and teaches Quran in the mosque and stuff, and he told me the Quran has the same tone throughout the Quran, but it doesn't look like that at all. Like, it's like he's obviously getting mad, and then it's coming out in what's happening, right? So again, that's another red flag.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we go to the next one, is where it starts getting more interesting. It's like we're talking about himself admiring himself, right? It's like verse 33:6. Like, he's closer to me than my own self and my family. Like, how is that even possible? Like, right? And then we can't marry his wives after he dies. Like, they're the mothers of the believers. And then he also is a.
Wasn't this? I don't know if this is true. I haven't I remember there was like Zubair. Was it Zubair or one of the companions wanted to marry Aisha, and he mentioned it. He mentioned it after Muhammad died, and then the verse came down. It's like, no,
his wives are like your
he shouldn't have mentioned it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you would see this like Omar used to say, "Oh, I can see your wife going to the fields to defecate. You better have her covered up." And next thing you know, a verse about hijabs here.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing is, if now obviously Sunni Muslims, to them this should be like a huge red flag, but for us skeptics, like, it's possible that these were made up after the fact in order to praise Omar, which is what Shias say. They say, you know, all of these things that are claiming to be, you know, Omar's blessings. Now, maybe they just made it up to make him look good. I don't know. But in either case, it's still a problem. Right? Either it's fabricated to praise Omar, or Muhammad was actually making things up as he went along. In either case, it's pretty bad.
Exactly, right? Like, you can't, it's the only way to think rationally about this. And you think about it, like, what is more objectively likely to be true? That this guy was actually talking to God, or he's just using God as a mouthpiece to get what he wants? And I mean, like, now he's appointing himself as all the mercy to all the worlds. But, like, there's verses in the Quran where he's inflicting terror into the hearts of the disbelievers. How can you do both things at the same time? Like, how can you be the mercy to all the worlds and then by self-admission say I was made victorious with terror? And so many hadith. So now let's get to verse number 3340, slide 16. Before we go forward, the one thing I've noticed is one of the craziest surahs in the Quran, one of the weirdest chapters, in my opinion, is chapter 33.
Oh yeah.
It's like a psychological wild ride in his head. you start off by, the battle of the trenches, and then he curses the hypocrites and
So
disbelievers.
it's the
Then he
Azab,
goes Ahzab, yeah,
which
33.
is in Medina,
Yeah,
supposedly.
and after this fighting part is, and then Muhammad starts, "Oh, I'm the best man. Follow me." Then he goes on to his wives, "Hey, you better cover up. I don't like you hanging out with other men." Then this is the same chapter that contains verses of him allowing himself to marry his adopted son's wife, then him allowing himself to marry as many women as possible. And then he keeps going on in this chapter, where this is the same chapter where he says that God is singing his praises in the heaven. And like this chapter, when you sit down and think about it, like you highlight this, you're like, wow. Like if
And you probably have more experience with this than me because I was in a Salafi community, but I've been to masjids where they say Muhammad was made, listen to this. All of existence was made for Muhammad to exist. Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, at the other mosque I went to, they were like, this is shirk, you can't say this is haram, don't say this. But the other masjid was like, Muhammad is the light, like basically, what, you heard these things.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's there's this thing in Pakistan. Okay, whenever you hear Barelvis do it, whenever you hear Muhammad's name, you gotta do this. You gotta look at your thumbs, kiss them, and then touch them to your eyes.
Oh,
So whenever
wow.
you
What?
yeah, no, whenever these people will hear the azan and Muhammad's name comes up,
Uh-huh.
or they're sitting in a khutbah, the whole crowd will be like, even when they're standing for the ikama.
Wow, I've never seen this
They
before.
still do this. And then one other thing I've noticed in Pakistan was as soon as the salah would finish, like the obligatory prayer with the Jama'ah, they all start singing the kalima, La ilaha, and they go 3 times. And then they have this hadith in Bukhari saying that they used to hear noises of loud zikr coming from the masjid of the Prophet. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like the weirdest one was, I was traveling in Pakistan and I had to stop to pray. And I go into this mosque, and like you're normally told to leave no spaces between the rows and be as close as you can to each other, lest your hearts will be stripped apart, right? So I was more like Deobandi Salafi at the time. So I go there, I'm like trying to fill the space, and I'm at the end. And then this man, instead of coming closer to me, keeps going away from me. So I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And I was trying to filling the space, and he then just would keep going away. After the prayer was finished, he told me why he was leaving the space, because there is this verse in the Quran, and again in Surah 33, I think it was Shahidan wa Mubashiran wa Nazira. And then this verse is interpreted by many Barelvi Sunni Muslims to imply that Muhammad is always present, only present. Yeah. Now, this guy told me that he was actually leaving the space so Muhammad could join and fill that space to pray with us. Yeah, I've seen bizarre stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, someone was asking, Beach was saying, do you think Muhammad was a narcissist? Like, I mean, it's a personality disorder, and obviously we can't know for sure, but like, what do you think?
I would say he was a narcissist, but it wasn't that he actually, like, his narcissism wasn't the initial thing. I think it was a part of the epilepsy he suffered from, where it was becoming inevitable with the more his epilepsy progressed. Because when in his initial part of his life, like when he's a young kid, in his teenagers, and even in his early adulthood, you don't see these narcissistic traits manifest the way they did after he became older. I would say though, like, in the end, yeah, he ended up being a narcissist. Was he consciously doing all of these things? Like, that's another question in itself, where, I mean, if there's another argument to be made with the epilepsy argument, is that Muhammad wasn't consciously doing all this manipulation. Rather than he would get so frustrated or he'll get so overwhelmed, he will have these episodes, and that is when the projection of Allah would come out. Again, like the epilepsy argument, like it's very detailed, very long. It's way too much evidence to go through. We don't want to talk too much about this.
Okay. So let's continue. This is a really interesting topic.
Yeah. So like if we were at verse 33-40. Okay.
Yep.
And that's the one where he declares himself that he's not the father of, and here the thing is, like, he's the last messenger, he says. This is what's important. It's like, mostly people wouldn't have it in the past that, oh, there's nobody ever coming again after me. But he made a point and made it clear that I'm the last, I'm the most special, and there's none after me. So that's very important too, where he's putting himself as the epitome of prophets, right? He's the chief prophet, and then following from that, like he led all the prophets in prayer when he went to his Miraj journey and all. So then the next verse, like 94:4,
So before we get to that, okay, actually do this one and then I'll ask you.
It's like the Quran is saying that we raised the zikr, the name of Muhammad, we elevated it, and so again, that's another self admiration. So you were saying something.
Yeah. So I don't know if you addressed this. So if not, let's talk about it now before we go any further. Which is, what about the times where Allah actually criticized Muhammad? So, for example, Abasa and read the Quran slowly is another example given. There's probably more examples I can't think of.
Yeah.
For example, why did you not have a great slaughter in the land? Why did you ransom those people for money? You wanted the money, but Allah wants you to whatever the reasons are for that. But yeah, what do you think about those examples where because Muslims actually bring this up a lot? Like, why is it that if he's truly a prophet, he could never criticize himself even once. Even if he just said, don't talk to the blind man and talk to those guys instead. I mean, a real prophet, he would never criticize himself even for small things like that. Like, come on, that's the argument. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, like I said earlier, is like once you get into the idea of like temporal epilepsy and then the personality disorders this guy had and the delusional mindset he was in, that's where I was saying, like, was he consciously doing it, or were these all projections of his frustration suddenly coming out, where he suddenly wanted something so bad that he'll have an episode and then beads of sweat will come down and then he'll fall on the ground, say some verses, and he'll marry his adopted son's wife? Was that going on? Or like the other issue is like he could also be very, very smart, and he was giving people what they wanted. When he thought that people are getting too suspicious, like his wife, he would like just a little bit of self-criticism in there,
Yeah, because
it could just be that.
I mean, honestly, the self-criticism is so mild.
Exactly, compared to as you can see, the self-clothing, like he's just all over himself.
Yeah, and the thing I personally think that the Zainab incident gives away the whole thing. By that point, I think he was making it up. I think there's enough evidence that shows that maybe he just had some crazy thing happen to him when he was meditating, and even like sane people have episodes like psychotic breaks. Like Arun Ra, he actually mentioned that when he was doing meditation, he saw things. Like he actually saw things, and now that he doesn't do it, he doesn't see things. So it's like people can see things, but I think that the Zainab incident gives away that at that point he was milking it. Like he was getting what he wanted,
I noticed this pattern too. Like, I mean, is initially when you see in his prophethood, take example of when he started getting the revelations, right? People would taunt him when revelations would stop for a while. Like there were the hadith literature said there's years of gaps, certain times,
and
or months. Exactly. So and then that would bother Muhammad so much, and then he would come up with verses like his frustration, like Surah Kausar and whatnot. Initially, I think he actually believed his delusions, but over time he had a self-realization that he could also use this to his advantage. And by that time, when he had the self-realization, Islam was already growing, and he was like, he's opportunistic, and he used it after that point. Like I said, this is all contingent upon the fact that we accept the validity of the seerah literature or the hadith literature, which came hundreds of years after the Quran. So like that's my take on the issue. But I would definitely say that self-criticism, when you think about it, it's a very genius thing.
Yeah.
You get most of the benefits you can get, and then you put a like 10-20% self-criticism to deflect the attention of people coming to this way,
Yeah.
So that's one way I'd see it.
Okay, so 9:44 is done, or
we just finished talking.
So next one?
Yeah. So here's an interesting bit. it's not just about him here in 833. It's a constant thing. Like when nations before Muhammad were punished by God, God would ask the prophets to build something or leave or get out of there, but he wouldn't stop or not send the punishment just because the prophet was amongst them. And whenever Muhammad was asked for a sign in the Quran, a miracle, he would always deflect it. Oh, it's like, oh, I can't give you a sign. But then his seerah is littered with miracles. Like the hadith letters. The Quran negates every demand for miracle. And in this verse, what the thing is being said is like, if Muhammad was in, the people asked Muhammad, oh, why can't God send us a sign or destroy us if you're so truthful? If we've been rejecting you for so long, we've been treating you so, why is God not doing anything, right? So Muhammad said, oh, because Allah doesn't punish you while the prophet is in there. But then one can ask, like, wait a second, God can invent laser guided missiles or something and just kill the specific people. And the funny thing is, like, if
or like the nation of Lot or the nation of Nuh, where they went on the big boat and yeah, like exactly.
And I mean, in the seer literature itself, there's this point where Muhammad is standing and he's going around the Kaaba, and these four chiefs started abusing him. So then the angel Gabriel comes and he points at one person and his head blows up with pus later, a few years later. Stuff like this. And the one guy falls off his donkey the next day and dies, getting his skull crushed. So I mean, if God is punishing these trivial people, like, why can't he like do this or give them a sign?
That's interesting. That's I never thought of it like that. Like this is a weird thing to say. Like, oh, while I'm here, you guys are fine. If I go, you guys are in big trouble.
So, and then, the next verse, 48:10. This one was very weird when I came across it. Like, it's very explicit in terms of what it says. It literally says that pledging something to Muhammad is the same as pledging something with Allah. And then the Quran emphasizes it with the metaphorical use of the hand of God being over your hand when you're giving allegiance to the Prophet. That is just, that's like putting Muhammad like right next to God, you know? Like nobody can actually take bay'ah or allegiance from Allah because nobody can talk to him except through Muhammad. It's like this beautiful cycle of manipulation that he created.
Interesting.
This one is funny. It's
next one.
Yes, 6940.
Okay. Yep.
Like that's, he's appointing himself and saying that this is definitely a word of a noble messenger. But when you take it literally, the verse itself, the Quran is the word of a man. It says, like this. Somebody brought it up to me, but I'm like, obviously, it didn't mean in that context. But it's kind of funny. Maybe there was that a slip up. Now you get it. You could say that, but that's not the word of Allah then, right? It's the word of Gabriel. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many of these little pesky little details. I mean, hiding in the Quran. There's this one that I always love. Is there's a verse in Surah 69, Surah Al-Haqqa, where it says that if Muhammad is a liar, we will cut up his aorta and we'll like immediately punish him. He mentions this punishment as the worthy punishment for a false prophet or if Muhammad was making something up. But here's the thing. He dies of the identical same thing a few years later after being poisoned. Literally all the words in the hadith say that Muhammad died and his self-admission was, I feel like my aorta is being cut. And the verse says, وَلَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينَ, something like that we'll cut up his aorta. The point is not that he was actually like putting himself like, on the chopping board by saying that, oh, I'm false prophet, that's why I'm dying because of my aorta being cut. I think it's this speech pattern, this recurring speech pattern. Like Muhammad has said that thing years before, that if I'm a false prophet, I'll die with my aorta being cut. But then the exact thing happens to him and he admits to it years later. It's a very interesting thing with like syntax, and maybe it's just him repeating himself or foreshadowing. Could be a bit of both.
Yeah, so I didn't realize I was muted to the broadcast. I was just saying this is a very interesting verse, and wow, you have quite a way of finding these interesting examples. I never thought of it. Even if it says this is the word of Gabriel, which is what I was told, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would God say the Quran is the words of Gabriel, Angel Gabriel? Like, what?
Isn't it supposed to be the literal speech of God?
Yeah, it's a bizarre way to put it. Okay, so next one.
So this is the most interesting part.
This so now Muhammad using the Quran.
Yes, this is the part where all the fun is. So, like I said, I didn't put all the detail in here. If anybody wants to read the detail about this, let's get to slide 20, and it's Surah Ahzab, verse 37. It's one of my favorite surahs in terms of the amount of BS it has in it. This verse is, as you can see, where Muhammad abolished the idea of adoption just so he could marry his adopted son's wife. The interesting bit here is the details of the story as mentioned in the Sirah and the Hadith literature. And it slips through in the Quran here too, which is, it's very irresponsible of Muhammad to even say that. Like, he's exposing himself. The story was that Muhammad's adopted son Zayd bin Harisa had his beautiful wife Zainab. Now, Zainab bin Jaysh was very beautiful. One day Muhammad went to visit Zayd. He couldn't find him, but he went to the door and Zainab was there, and she got up and then she came to Muhammad and she was wearing revealing clothes. So something happened in Muhammad's heart. He uttered something over his breath and then walked away. And apparently the literature says that Zainab always had her heart's out for Muhammad because she didn't actually want to marry a slave, because Zayd was actually a freed slave. Anyways, so the funny thing here is what Muhammad really had feelings for her. As you can see, as the verse itself implies, it's like, but you had hidden in your heart what God was to disclose. What was hidden in Muhammad's heart, right? So Muhammad literally used God, and this is the funny part. This marriage happened in the heavens. God married Muhammad to his adopted son's wife and abolished adoption for that very specific reason. It's at this point, it should be crystal clear that this man is manipulating. Now, some people might say that, okay, how did Muhammad knew Zainab from before? Why didn't he approach her then? The issue here is, firstly, he might not have seen her the way he saw her that day. And secondly, the way his delusion was progressing, we find a ditto copy example of what happened here in real life in the 21st century. There's a cult leader called Wayne Bent.
Yeah.
What he did, it wasn't his adopted son. He married his actual son's wife. Now, the way he played out, and he explains it on his interview, was like he was sitting, and then God came to him and he fell on the ground and he had this episode. Then God told him what needed to be done, and from there on he went on. And the striking similarity is just shocking. Like, it's the same, almost the same thing. If anybody ever wants, they should definitely, it's like a minute-long clip, I think.
Yeah, so I just put on the screen. I know you can't see it, apologies. But if you want to watch the video, Would You Marry Your Adopted Son's Ex-Wife? I got this clip from Abdullah Gondal and I put it right in there. And this video is banned in Pakistan. So if you're not in Pakistan, you are lucky you can see this video. Pakistan has gone out of their way to ban this one specific video. It has 8,000 views. It has 8,000 views and they banned it.
I love the Urdu version where Harris said the The voiceover was hilarious.
Yeah, that one was banned first, and now I think even the English one is banned. So yeah. So just a few comments in the chat saying that this is interesting in the context of 3336 as well, saying that it's not for anyone to have a choice in the matter, and Zayd is the only one mentioned in the Quran. What I was taught was that what he hid in his heart was that he had to marry Zainab, you know, his beautiful cousin slash daughter-in-law. That was what he was hiding, and the reason he was hiding it was because everyone would think he's crazy, and he's you know, the P word, not the P word, not the pedophile P word, the other P word, because it is actually a very strange thing to, like, you know, once someone is your daughter-in-law, it's kind of, she's like your daughter, your little daughter, even if it's not actually your son or not, but like you see her in that sense. So to see her in the other sense is like really strange, and it's taboo, right? And it's taboo for a reason, because there's some boundaries there that can, if they're crossed, it can be like
power
a lot
imbalance,
of power and abuse, and you know, it can lead to a lot of kind of terrible things. So there's those taboos are there, even in his culture.
The worst literally is so ridiculous. It says, وَتَغْشَى النَّاسِ, like you were hiding because of the people, like you were scared what they're gonna say.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
And you should be more scared of Allah, right?
Yeah, exactly. And well, what's interesting is the Prophet cons. So there may not be any restriction for the believers in respect of the wives of their adopted sons. Did this become a trend? Like everybody's just marrying their adopted son's wife? Why mention that?
It's such
weird.
This whole incident is so strange. Obviously, adoption was forbidden, so you can't even adopt per se anymore.
Yeah.
So why would Allah want to make this clear to believers? It's such a bizarre thing. I actually have a video on Zainab, a long video where I go through some of these things in detail. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next continuation of this Zainab thing. Well, after he married Zainab, he was having his feast, and after the feast, he noticed like a few of his companions are hanging around, chit-chatting away, and then Muhammad is too shy to ask them to leave. So guess what happens? The creator of the cosmos steps in to tell his guests, please don't linger too long.
Wait, hold on. Are you on 66.4?
I am on 3353.
Oh, sorry. I missed this. I think I missed the slide. 33. Oh, it's on 3353. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So then, like, God avoided so many important things to mention in his last and final communication with mankind, but he made sure to tell us that you should not linger in Muhammad's house because he gets annoyed. And I mean, when you actually go into the details, studying the revelation or the circumstances, there's a point where these two Sahaba are chit-chatting, and then one of them says, oh, I see the Prophet isn't happy. Wait for it. It's coming. And literally that happens. Like, it's one of the hadiths I posted about it in detail. All right, let's go to the next one, 66.4. This one is very, very interesting. Like, the precursor to this incident is about Muhammad being caught sleeping with his slave called Maria Kibtiya. And he was in Hafsa's bed, I believe. And it was Hafsa's day, and Hafsa got mad, and she told it to Aisha, and then they started conspiring, they say, against him. Basically, they were unhappy, and they didn't want Maria being around, so they wanted to get rid of her. Muhammad wanted to keep Maria, and I mean, when you read from the first few verses, you notice that Muhammad's like, Allah is telling Muhammad, your wives might not like you having sex with your slave girl, but doesn't matter. Allah allows it. Go for it. And then literally the next verse it says you are absolved of all your oaths.
What?
And then, and then you're not obliged to hold on to your oaths. And then it continues on, where then Muhammad uses Allah, literally straight up religious blackmail, saying that if your wives don't straighten themselves out and be obedient and nice wives, well, let them know that Allah and the angels and all the believers are against them, and that Allah can just replace them with new ones. They could be virgins, they could be just better in every way.
You know, this is interesting. I just want to kind of jump in there for a second, that Like, people have said to me when I said, well, Aisha was trapped in this situation, they say, oh, she could have just left him. Like, really? Really?
What happens?
Come
People
on.
who dissent.
Look at this. Like, all of the believers, like the Quran is threatening the wives, saying all of the believers and the angels and God and this and they believed in this, okay? Like, some of them grew up in this society. Like, for example, Hafsa, she's a daughter of Abu Bakr. Hafsa, daughter of Omar. Aisha, daughter of Abu Bakr. They grew up in Islam. They believed, I think many of them believed in it, right? I mean, this is what they were told to be was true, and they believed in it. And did they really have a choice? I don't think so.
It's a mental prison where you can't. You're just saying like, hey, you don't like me, you can leave, but when you leave, I'm coming for you.
And there's no freedom of religion. There's no freedom
of
religion back then, right? There's no like what are they going to do? I mean, there was a possibility they could have ran away and went to like the Roman Empire or something. I don't know, but
then they'll become
they don't even and they don't even speak the language, or like, I mean, imagine like how difficult that would be for them, right? So, yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, it doesn't stop there with his wife. Like, this surah itself, like, if anybody has a chance, read it from verse 1 to verse 12.
So,
very interesting.
One more thing I want to say about this is I was taught this is related to honey. And
exactly.
Stinky honey.
Here's the funny bit.
Wait. Have you ever heard of stinky honey?
I've heard the whole story.
No. Have you ever smelt honey that gives you bad, like, is there such a thing as stinky honey?
It might be. I don't know. I've had honey directly from like those hives with the honeycomb and everything. It smells and tastes fine. What I could see is
it's not like onions and garlic. Come on, it's honey. Like, why would it give you bad breath?
Keeping in mind, like, it's high in glucose, and back in the day, with the dental hygiene wasn't a huge thing.
Yeah.
And if they eat too much honey, but they don't eat a lot of other food, it might give rise to bad odors. But I mean,
Muhammad was gullible in this sense, and he just believed his wife.
What's interesting is there's one Sahih hadith, and almost the earlier seerah literature says that this incident relates to the Muhammad being caught having sex with a slave girl. There's a Sahih hadith in Nasai, and then you're also telling me that this verse is revealed for a petty thing where Muhammad's eating honey. Why would God be threatening his wives like this for over honey? It doesn't add up.
Mm-hmm.
So you can admit that, okay, the hadith either contradict, or the honey thing is a cover-up, or the Quran is just so poorly written that it doesn't make any sense, because it's expressing undue and unproportional anger over something as trivial as eating honey.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good counter.
Now let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Back to chapter 33, one of my favorite chapters. Okay, so the next two slides, like from 33:28 to 30, you will see Muhammad's jealousy in full swing. Like, he really did not want other people messing around with his wives. So this incident was like Muhammad was having issues, and they complained about not having enough money. So Muhammad, instead of giving them money and stuff, there's an other incident before I get into the details. Is in the hadith, Muhammad has his wives around him complaining that they don't get enough, and Aisha and Hafsa
don't get enough money. You mean, right?
Yeah, they're not getting enough worldly things.
Yeah.
Then Omar comes in and Abu Bakr comes in, and they start laughing that these wives are saying that, and then they slap their daughters like.
Yeah.
Over this thing, and then Muhammad retreats, I think, for like 28 days or 29 days into his hut on the roof, away from his wives because of this incident. And now, instead of Muhammad talking, he's using Allah to talk for him and negotiate for him, or not negotiate, is basically threaten and blackmail his wives into obedience again. Like, if you really think that you're not getting enough and you want the worldly life, we will give it to you and we will let you go. Like, okay, well, if you could give it to them, why didn't you give it to them yet?
That's a good point.
But if you want Allah and His Messenger and the invisible imaginary afterlife, to them it's realer than this life, then you got to stay and be patient with whatever Muhammad gives you, you know. And the next verse is like, he's so jealous. He's like, if anybody else's wives commit adultery, it's okay. But if my wives, they're gonna get double the punishment. Like, like, what, you gonna stone them twice?
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that too.
And then it's the continuation of the verses in the next slide, 33, 31 onwards. Yep. And whichever one of his wives are pious, they'll get double the reward. You know, like he's making sure, like, from every angle, that they have really no choice.
Yeah.
And I mean, just think about it. He's already threatening them in such mischievous and manipulating ways. You can already see the psychological extent and control this man has. If they actually took a stand against him, he's not scared of threatening them here. He was straight up throw him under the bus. Yeah. He cares about himself.
Yeah, but these are like, you mean like psychological threats, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like a psychological prison. And then here again, like in 33, 32, you're not like other women. You're special women. You know, you can't talk to men. Like, he doesn't even want his wife speaking to men in a polite way. Like, come on. And amazing. Then here's the best thing. Verse 33, 32. When somebody asks you why the hijab is in place, this is why. Don't make your beauty and don't display your beauty like you used to in the days of ignorance. He's talking to his wives. The wives are the best example for all Muslim women. And you can now see the actual motive of hijab is just to cover women's beauty, like self-admission right there. And I think later on in one of the verses, he actually goes beyond just covering as like a facial. He says, put a barrier between the men you talk to. The same chapter. You can also see like the progression of his jealousy and frustration.
Yeah, and hey, you know, it seems like he didn't even believe Aisha when she came back from the incident of Ifk, when she was left behind, and this young, beautiful, handsome man, who I forgot who it was now, he brought her back to the town. Everyone's tongue started wagging, saying they did something. It seems like Muhammad didn't believe her, and she was crying to death. According to the story, she made herself so sick, and but Muhammad didn't have anything positive to say to her, and he was asking everyone, like, what do you think about Aisha? Ali, what do you think about Aisha? Zainab, what do you think about Aisha? According to the hadith, right? He was questioning everybody.
Why would he question other people if God is telling him what happened? Zach, what's the whole point? If God's gonna tell you she's innocent. So when he exhausts all the possibilities, okay, I think she's innocent. Okay, now it's time to put the verse in there.
Or not even I think she's innocent. I have to do some damage control before it gets worse. And yeah, she's innocent. Okay, like she's gonna have to be innocent. Allah's gonna have to make her innocent. Now the weird thing is, I don't totally get how this works, but Shias don't think she's innocent. I don't quite understand how they just throw out the verse in the Quran. But anyways, that's a different topic. Let's stick to the topic.
Yeah. So before we progress further, just one more thing was the exact verses aren't in the Quran anymore, but it's the verses, the satanic verses incident. That is also a prime example of using the Quran to your own benefit. And the story, like, it's very, very well preserved in the Sirah and the Hadith literature. And there's, according to Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who wrote the exegesis of Sahih al-Bukhari, he says that there's two mursal hadith that also confirm Sahih mursal hadith that confirm the incident as recorded about the satanic verses. What happened was Muhammad and his people were suffering a lot of execution and torture from the Meccans because they were opposing their gods and advocating a completely opposite way of life. To the point it got so desperate where Muhammad was reciting Surah Najm around the Kaaba, and he got to the end part, and then he mentioned the gods of the kuffar at that time, the idols, as high-flying cranes. Okay, and then the rest of the incident is still preserved in Sahih Bukhari and other Sahih books, where it says that everybody, including the kuffar, fell in prostration. Okay, now with the original ending that we have now, it's actually going against their gods. So it doesn't make sense for them to fall prostrate there. So he did say something that they agreed with, and they fell prostrate too. Now, what followed on was like people were the first migration to Abyssinia happened. They heard a rumor that Meccans have accepted Islam, so they migrated back almost, and found out halfway that no. But this is very well preserved. Even if you open Jalalain or Tafsirs, it's in there too. And the verse itself, the wording is also preserved. And then Muhammad realized when his followers started questioning, wait a minute, you were telling us to worship one God and he's no idols, blah, blah, blah. And now you're telling us that, these idols are also some demigods you can use or supplicate to. So when he realized it, like, he added the amendment in it. And the whole story goes that Gabriel came to Muhammad. And this is hilarious. If you can open up, I don't have it here, but open up Surah Hajj, verse 52. I believe that's the one.
Surah Hajj is 22?
Yeah.
And 22:52?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yep. And we did not send before you any messenger or prophet except when he spoke or decided Satan flew into some misunderstanding.
It's about the satanic verses. Now, the problem was the cover-up. The cover-up had to have happened. This is the cover-up happening. The verses that were in the verses themselves are preserved in the Hadith literature, but the cover-up is still found in the Quran. Literally, God is saying that every messenger that has ever come, sometimes they recite something, but it's actually Satan speaking from their tongue. But then later, Allah will come and fix it up for them. What? This throws a...
It's very strange.
No integrity.
How
do you trust if everything isn't from Satan? And how do you distinguish which is and which isn't, right?
Very strange, yeah.
Like, the mere fact that this verse exists is just problematic enough. Like, this... But anyways, we sidestepped a little bit. Let's get back to... I think we're on slide 25. Yeah. This is very interesting. So, in these two verses, you literally see that Muhammad gives himself an exception from the rule or the limit of marrying a maximum of 4 wives, where he says that if anyone offers herself to you, you can marry her. This, and the verse, it literally says, Prophet wishes to marry her. This is only for you, excluding the other believers. It's like the most exceptional exception he's created for himself. And then it says that we have made known obligatory concerning their wives and their rights. So basically, they know that they can't go beyond the limit, but Muhammad can. And then the next verse goes on.
So this is very confusing. This is basically a situation where somebody came up to Muhammad and said, "Oh, hold on, wait, that's different. That's 51. 51 is saying that no, actually, this is a different situation. What is this? What is this describing?
Basically, it's.
So a believing woman who gives herself to the prophet. Okay, so somebody comes up to the prophet and said, marry me, and it's saying he doesn't have to give her mahr, I think, right?
No, it just says that he can exceed the 4 women limit.
Okay.
And I think as Tabari, he mentions in History of Tabari, one of the volumes, where a woman comes, she's from a noble family, gives himself in marriage to Muhammad. Muhammad accepts. She's happy. She goes back to her family. Her family's like, what have you done? Muhammad is a womanizer. What are you doing? You're apart from a noble family. So then she went back to Muhammad and got the nikah nullified.
Divorce, right? Yeah. And 3351 is describing, isn't this describing like the situation where, for example, you don't have to sleep with Sauda? Like you can just basically...
Yeah, exactly.
You can make special exceptions or something, right?
Yeah, you can make you can do whatever you want. Basically, just giving him a license.
The Quran should just be one verse. Just Muhammad, just do what you want. Allah, signed Allah.
It's like a blank check. You can just write whatever.
Quran's a blank check, isn't it?
And it's after these 2 verses, even Aisha was like, "Yo, man, you can't be that stupid to not notice it." Like if you go to the next slide,
Yeah.
she's commenting on the verses, and she even said, "It seems that your Lord hastens to satisfy your desires." What's going on here?
Yeah,
God is always running after Muhammad's
that's
pleasure.
strange. Yeah.
So let's keep going. Let's get to the Qibla. This is classic. So the very important thing happened was when Muhammad initially migrated to Medina. He had a potential group that he could have converted, which was namely the Jews that had been living there for years. Now, the Jews would pray, or their Qibla was Masjid al-Aqsa or Jerusalem. So initially, you'll see even in the Sirah literature in the Quran, like Muhammad starts by even in the Quran, you see this progression of frustration, where initially the Jews and the Christians, they're good people as long as they do righteous deeds and follow their books, they're going to go to heaven. But then slowly and slowly, when Muhammad tries and tries ways to please them, and they just refuse to bend or accept him, and they're just straight up calling him out, we just don't believe you, then you can see the gradual shift in tone in the Quran, where from good people who will go to heaven, Jews and Christians, you can't be friends with them. They're enemies of God. They're always conspiring against Muslims. And it's like a conspiracy theory level of paranoia he almost exhibits, where they are like dogs and donkeys, and then all sorts of insults start going in. So once he realized that he cannot convince them by showing them solidarity, by worshipping in the same direction, he then wanted to solidify his own position and his own religion. And we all know that Muhammad was born in Mecca. He had a longing for that place. It was his hometown. And these verses straight up tell you, we have certainly seen you asking God to change the Qibla, so basically we accepted your dua and you can turn your face because it's your hometown. And then the next verse goes on, like, who you can do whatever, they won't believe you, and anybody who disagrees with you is among the wrongdoers. Like, do you see the frustration come out? Like the one after the other. So these kind of mind games like he was playing, I mean, once you look back at it, it becomes very obvious. And the problem is you can so clearly see that Muhammad had not thought out everything. He was taking things like, if it goes, it goes. He'll go upon the situation. And that's why the idea of having a continuous revelation is smart in that sense, where you can just, it's malleable. Instead of you write a whole book, well, you're just stuck with a piece of literature, right? All right, so now
just to add a little tiny bit to this, Qibla is a direction of prayer, and what Abdullah Gondal was saying was that Muhammad, and I think this makes a lot of sense. He was originally facing the Baitul Maqdis, the Masjid al-Aqsa, the Jerusalem, the same way that the Jews were praying in Arabia, and he was praying the same direction, so to kind of have something in common. And eventually he changed the whole thing, and everybody got mad at him, and so he's basically justifying it. So yeah.
Just one verse is Dr. Zakir Naik's favorite verse. I don't know why it popped up in my head. It says, "Ta'alaw ila kalimatin sawa'in baynana wa baynakum." I think it's Surah Imran, verse 64 or something. It says that, come to the common grounds between us. Like, it's telling the Jews and the Christians, be friends, be together, do the same things. But then like I said, like when he realized that, oh, it's like a losing battle, they're not going to convert, you just see the sudden shift in tone and frustration.
Yeah.
In fact, one hadith is very important where Muhammad, before he expelled any of their tribes, let me actually just try to find it. Before he expelled any of their tribe, he went to these tribes and gave them a warning: accept me as a messenger of God, or I will expel you once I come into power. And you will see, it's in the Sahih, I think Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. I'll have to find it.
Okay.
But it goes on, like it fits in perfectly with this whole idea of like him.
So just summarize it. So what was it? What happened?
So initially, like when Muhammad migrated to Medina, he saw the Jews and the Christians as opportunities to grow his religion by converting them. That's why you see him be initially trying to be very friendly with them, showing solidarity with them. You're praying to the same direction. As long as they're initially, you don't even have to be Muslim. the verses in the Quran
Oh,
were
yeah,
initially,
yeah,
you can just
yeah.
be a
Good
good
point.
Christian and Jew,
Yeah.
and you'll go to heaven.
Yeah.
But then later on, when he realized that, oh, these people aren't converting, there's a hadith where he goes and threatens them that he's going to expel them when he comes into power.
This is very interesting. I never thought about that.
The politics surrounding it.
What if it's true what you just said, that like in the beginning, Muhammad didn't even care if they converted. He just wanted the political power.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the verses of the Quran, because I've heard, some Muslims are confused by it, and they're like, why does the Quran say that, there'll be no fear upon them, nor will they grieve, meaning they won't go to hell? The Jews will believe from the Christians and Jews. And my teachers used to say, no, those who believe means those who believe in Muhammad. But then they're not Christians and Jews.
Yeah.
So they said it means the ones that converted to Islam. But that's like such a weird way to put it. Like those who believed from Christians and Jews, that's Muslims actually. But anyways, whatever the case is, maybe this isn't. I don't know. Maybe this is crazy, or maybe this is an interesting point that early Christians and Jews were not expected even to convert. They were just supposed to be like, Muhammad was just appealing to them, hoping that they would accept him as a prophet, even though we're Christian. So, which didn't happen.
The politics surrounding the whole thing is very, very interesting when you think about like how his life progressed, his decisions. When you have a bigger picture and you look back at it and you apply like political science ideas, you're like, whoa, this guy. Like, I mean, obviously there's some things he could have done better, but like it's very interesting seeing the dynamics he created, especially with the Jews. He did not like them. So let's get to slide number 28. Mm-hmm. 49 too. Yep. Okay, so this is interesting. See how Muhammad is literally using his position as a prophet to demand respect, saying that if anybody speaks loudly to Muhammad, he will lose all his good deeds. And then he reinforces the idea by saying that indeed the best believers are the ones that speak to Muhammad in the most polite and the most calmest tones. Do you like at this point? It's just like, you got to be kidding me, man! Like he's literally making God demand respect for him, so that people don't like speak like God. It's somewhat self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into the next phase of this, graphic content, his followers did very interesting things. Like I said, I've only included a few things. Like I will mention certain narrations that some scholars say are true, some aren't. But let's get into what we have now. Okay. So we are on slide number 30. So as you can see from that little connotation at the bottom, the holy spittle is finally here. So I mean, just to give you an idea of the level of fanaticism these guys had for Muhammad, or what he had created in their minds, was like, these two people were promised some glad tidings from Muhammad. When they asked, they rejected the glad tidings, seeing what it was. And then he's like, okay, well, I'll just give him to people who like him. So he gave him to two of his. So the message, I'll read it out for you guys. Yeah. The messenger, Allah's messenger called for a cup of water and washed his hands in that and face too, and put the saliva in it, and then said, drink out of it and pour it over your faces and over your chest and gladden yourselves. They took hold of the cup and did as Allah's messenger had commanded them to do so. But here's the funny bit. His wife was hearing this behind the curtain, and she's like, spare me some blessed holy spittle water too. They gave her some too. I mean, I'm just showing this one version of this hadith. There's like, it's recorded in Bukhari, Muslim, and one other place. About the same, but they're just rubbing used ablution water and spit on his body, and it's not like they're just doing it out of himself. He's actually commanding them to do it.
Wow!
Like, look, and then he said, "Drink out of it and pour over your chest." Like that is crazy. That is just beyond. Like you're convincing people that your bodily excrements are somehow blessed.
Wow! Interesting.
Let's get to the next one. I mean, this is one example. He spit. He loved to spit, man. Like, I don't know what the hell was with him. This time, like, they're running out of food. So, make the prophet spit in the food and you'll have abundance of food. Like, The holy spittle, man, is really it's working magic for those guys. This is amongst many of the things. Is you know what they call in French pour homme, the perfume cologne.
Okay. Oh, eau de toilette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just diluted sweat, you know. I'm saying there were companions of Muhammad who would literally take his sweat and apply it on their bodies as cologne. That's just bizarre to a next level. Like, I mean, come on. Like, the guy's actually got you convinced that his sweat is, and if you go into the details in other narrations, it's this musk smell from paradise, something like that. Like,
yeah.
Let's go to the next one. I guess there's another one here.
The tent?
Okay. Yep, the last slide.
Okay.
So I'll just read this one out for you guys. I came to the Prophet while he was inside a red leather tent, and I saw Bilal taking the remaining water of ablution of the Prophet. So he's already used the water. He's taken the leftover. And the people were taking that water and rubbing it on their faces. And whoever could not get any of it would share the moisture of their hands of their companions and then rub on his face.
Wow.
These guys were so obsessed.
Yeah.
They're running after each other just to touch the water Muhammad touched so they can rub it on. So.
Yeah. And this reminds me of the saying of, I forget who it was, but it was during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah when they sent a messenger to talk to Muhammad and try to convince him. And he came back and he told Abu Sufyan, these people, they respect this man. I wish they would have said worship this man, but I think the Muslim narrators scratched out worshipped and put respect. They respect this man more than the kings of whatever, Rome and whatever he mentioned, right? Like, this is worship. Like, if this is not worship, I don't know what is. Right?
Yeah. I forgot to put that one hadith in there where it says, no one will have... Oh, wait, I found it. Perfect. No one will have true faith till he loves me, that is Muhammad, more than his father, his children, and guess what? All of mankind put together. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari. I'm not kidding. Actually, I want you to show it on. Like,
okay.
I'll send you the link. Let me... Okay, there's Sky.
Yeah, so there's this thing in Islam that you have to love Muhammad, which is a very strange thing because you can't, like, choose who you love. Right? It's either you love someone or you don't, but, like, Muhammad commanded people that you have to love me. Yeah, it's so bizarre. Like, it's such a strange thing that would... Hold on. Where's the link? Oh, here's the link. Okay. Oops. Shoot, the link didn't copy. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. None of you will have faith till he loves me more than his father's children, all mankind.
Hey, come on, dude. Like, I mean, and we haven't even brought up the idea of blasphemy yet. Like, these people would, like, just kill everyone whoever abused him.
Oh, geez, that would have been interesting.
I mean, it would be way longer. I mean, just to give you an idea of, like, two incidents that come to mind. Is the incident of the blind Jewish slave. I don't know if you can find the hadith too if you go on sunnah.com. Straight blind Jews. Is this lady was a slave of this man in Medina.
Oh, I found it.
And she used to slander Muhammad, or at least not mention him in good words.
Yeah, she used to abuse him.
The owner of the lady was a Muslim. He was blind, actually, I think. Yeah, he was blind, and then one night he warned her to stop abusing Muhammad, and she didn't listen. So this lady had a kid, and she was pregnant, I believe. And
so what happened was, she began to slander the Prophet. So he took an axe, placed it on her belly, pressed it, and killed her. And then the Messenger of Allah was told about it, and he said, "Oh, people, be witnesses that no diya, no blood money, is to be paid for her blood." Narrated by Abu Dawood, and a trustworthy chain of narrators.
It's also found in Nasai. So there's two different books that say it's Sahih. But I mean, and this shows like these people were straight up fanatics. There's this one point where Muhammad ordered the killing of one of the leaders of the Jews. I think it was Ka'b bin Ashraf. So when he was killed, the other wanted to kill somebody else because the Muhajirin had killed. I don't know. It was one group of people that killed him, and the other ones also wanted the reward. So they found this other poet, and then Muhammad sent another assassin team to go kill that one. I think it was Abu Afaq. Like when you look at it, like this guy, he's demanding absolute blind obedience and servitude. He is going to extents where he's not only self-flattering, he's showing extreme signs of narcissism, delusion. He's projecting his jealousy on it through God into scripture. He is solving his marital problems by using God as his mouthpiece and basically using religious blackmail. He's using God to get unlimited women for himself, and he's getting the 1/5 of the booty. It's just, once you look at it from any objective lens, you come to the striking realization that the guy was, if not willingly, was constantly, or at least definitely, manipulating people. Like he was, like I think this leaves no shadow of a doubt this isn't from God. I mean, it's just, there's too many red flags here, as you say. And it just brings me back to the point, like how do Muslims not see these inconsistencies? Like the funny thing is, what I like doing is I make these scenarios, but I change the words or the names of places. Yeah, exactly. So I'll change the name slightly, and then I'll ask Muslims to comment on it. They're like, "Oh my God, this is so terrible," blah blah blah. But then I'll think, "Oh, by the way, it's actually your prophet doing it." You see a sudden, like, their faces drop. No way. I mean, like, I've actually seen Muslims defend the holy spittle.
Yeah.
There was this one guy who told me that his saliva had medicinal benefits.
It's interesting.
Because he wants, here's the funny bit. He spat in Ali's eye because his eye was sore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And then his eye became, and I'm like, okay, first you're using your own text to prove it. Like, that's just circular. Like, it's not gonna get you anywhere. And I mean, I just want to bang my head on the wall sometimes. Like, why don't people see this? It's so self-apparent.
Yeah, exactly.
It gets frustrating after a while too. I mean,
yeah, you can't. I guess it's one of those things. You can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink.
Yeah.
So yeah, all we could do is just to keep sharing these things. You did an incredible job in putting this together. It was very eye-opening. We should do another one, and on a different topic of your choice. I love how directed you are with these references. It's like, like you brought up examples that I've never thought of in reference to like this topic. Like I've heard these things, but I've never connected it to this theme, and this idea of having like one central theme where we discuss and we just like build on it. I mean, that's amazing. I love that.
I know, right? And I mean, there's so much we skipped, man. Like, we could have gone into, like, for example, the constant mentioning of Muhammad's name during Salah, and then the tashahhud being obligatory. If you don't send salutations upon Muhammad, your Salah isn't accepted. Like, straight up. Right? Things like this.
Yeah, or and like, there's a hadith that if you don't say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, after his name, your dua is held up. It doesn't go to Allah or something.
Yeah, you have to say more durood. The more you send salutations and love to Muhammad, the more it's probable that your prayer will get answered by God.
Yeah, so strange.
Like,
yeah.
It creates such a mental prison, man. Once you get somebody to believe that God is talking to me, from there on it's a downhill slope. He can do whatever he wants to you. Like today, actually,
totally.
I was coming back from work, and I came across these two individuals, and my bus was like 20 minutes. So I'm like, okay, and they were giving out free Bibles. So I started talking to them, like, what concept do they have? Like, what lens do they look through at religion, right? So he had this Arab Bible and a bunch of different ones. And I asked him, okay, how did we come about? And he's like, oh, Adam and Eve had sex and we are here. So I'm like, well, and that my first reaction was, well, that doesn't really make sense from an evolutionary or a genetic perspective. As soon as I said that, his wife replied like, oh, you came from two people. How can't we come from two people? And like, it's just sad seeing like people not being able to think outside the box. Like, and a lot of these people, it's not that they're stupid or they can't think. No, a lot of these people are doctors and engineers and very qualified, even have high IQs, and they're very intelligent. But then when it comes to religion, it shuts down. The critical thinking shuts down. And it's the way knowledge is compartmentalized, and that's what the difference is between indoctrination and choosing your own religion. Because the way indoctrinated beliefs affect you, they get so ingrained in your brain from such an early age. It is so hard to go through, to let them go. I hope if there's Muslims watching this, like, they actually put a thought towards this, that what is more likely to be true? We have a book that appears stuck in time in the 7th century. We have a man that propagates 7th century ideas, and his ideas are outdated. They're not good for progress in the future. Maybe just think outside the box. Maybe see these inconsistencies. Maybe he was making it up. Is it more likely that an angel was talking to him, that too alone, and nobody else could see it? Or is it more likely that the 7th century man was opportunistic and suffered from something, and things kind of got out of hand, and people living in that era of the scientific era of scientific ignorance and superstition just didn't have the tools to decipher what was going on, and people were historically gullible. Still are.
and we can also like remind people that there's very little we actually know about Muhammad. Like, we actually know. There's so many question marks. And to the viewer that said Abdullah Samir will be a Christian one day, he's just on transition, so it'll not be obvious he wanted to convert to Christianity. No, not really. It's not. Such a move is predictable, but it's not predictable. It's not happening. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen, but it's very, very, very unlikely. The same reasons I disbelieve in Islam are the same reasons I disbelieve in Christianity. There is just no good reason to believe any of these books are from God. There's no good reason to believe that the entire world is wrapped around an incident that happened approximately 2,000 years ago, that supposedly 500 people saw and supposedly was written down in some book, and supposedly now 2,000 years later we hear about it, that it happened, and there's almost no two accounts of it that actually add up.
Agree. Yeah.
Whether he was in the tomb, or whether he wasn't found in the tomb, whether he appeared and said, "I'll meet you over there in Galilee," whether he was already in Galilee or not. There's no consistency in these stories, and we're expected to believe that this is God's incarnate Son that came down from the heavens, and all we have is some scraps of like parchment that 100+ years after, like, people are writing about what happened, and we're supposed to believe this? Like, come on. I'm not.
I mean, yeah, it's sad to see, like, billions still, like, we're in the 21st century. I mean, and we're still stuck with this problem. Like, the problem is, like, religion surviving to this point isn't proof that religion makes sense. No, religion has been fighting a losing one-way battle for centuries now. It is a manifestation of human nature, of tribalism, of our stupidity and gullibility. In fact, like, we just have a tendency to believe things that not necessarily make sense, but they make us feel good. And that's very important.
Absolutely.
You want to take some questions and then wrap it up?
Yeah, I'll take 5 minutes of questions, and we will just end it on that. So, in case you're saying that because I did poorly on my last debate, that's true. I did do poorly with my Ross debate. The guy is a very intelligent man, and he came at the Bible from a very different angle than I was not expecting, which is the Bible and science. Where, to be honest, the Bible and science do not mix. Like those two topics, they don't go well together. But
you remember what Zakir Naik did to Dr. William Campbell?
Yeah, but Hugh Ross has been writing books on this for like his whole life, and I couldn't challenge him on his quotes because I don't know the Bible and I didn't know those quotes. So a couple of times I asked him something and he said something and I had to look it up after the debate. So maybe if I have time, I'll kind of do a summary of where I went wrong. I know Abdullah Gondal's already posted some really good points that I did miss. But it's kind of difficult sometimes when you're on the spot. And, honestly, I was feeling a bit intimidated by him. The man is like in his 70s and he's been doing this his whole life. He's way out of my league. So, a mutual friend asked us to talk and I did, but I think in retrospect, I definitely wasn't ready for that. So it's fine. It was a learning experience, but I am in no way convinced of Christianity just because the arguments he brought, I feel like he's very much stretching the meanings of words, right? Like
sophistry.
Like you gave an example, right, Abdul Gondal, like how using a word that meant something back then and giving it a brand new meaning that doesn't exist anymore. That never existed, and you're kind of projecting that back on. What did you call it?
It's the equivocation fallacy. I think he said something.
Eisegesis, you said something?
Eisegesis, yeah. It's basically reading your own bias into the text. And that's what essentially it was. I mean, I wouldn't say you did terrible in the debate. I wouldn't even call it a debate because there was no moderator.
That's true. It wasn't a debate.
And there was no struggle. Yeah. It's a discussion.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could see that he is very articulate and eloquent, but a lot of the points he made did show he made a lot of fallacious claims, and it did show the constant recurring problem. Like his arguments suffered the same problems the Quran and science arguments suffered.
Yeah, like just one example which I missed. In the beginnings was the heavens and the earth. Like it's the first verse of the Bible, it's already wrong. Like right at the beginning. There was no earth in the beginning. In the beginning was the heavens. And then 9 billion years later, I made the earth. Not in the beginning was the heavens and the earth. No. So, I mean...
Or like the flowering plants. Well, I mean, we can go on and on.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
The thing is, he was a guest, and you have to be nice because it's your first time, right? Like, and if you want, you can do it again, and maybe next time you can be more confrontational.
Yeah, I think that was my mistake too, not being confrontational enough. But yeah, that's a different topic. So, so let's wrap it up then. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Abdullah Gondal. You're back on Facebook for now. Until you get banned again. Unfortunately, there's no real way to survive these social media purges. I think the only real thing that survives is my blog. That hasn't been shut down yet. And even like Atheist Republic, they were like DOSed, right? So their website went down. But that only goes on for a while and then eventually goes back up. So that's not like a permanent ban. That's more like you just flooded and your site is inaccessible. Okay, so thanks again everyone for joining, and thanks to the couple of people that donated as well. Appreciate it. And we'll have Abdullah Gondal on here again before you know it. Thanks, Abdullah. Take care. Bye.